Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something dangerous. When did you first decide who you are? Was it you who decided? Or was it decided for you? Because here's the truth most people spend a lifetime avoiding. You were born infinite. But somewhere along the line, they handed you a mask and told you, this is who you are, now behave. And you did. You played the role, you wore the smile, you spoke the lines like a well-rehearsed actor on a stage built by strangers, but deep inside you knew the audience was clapping for a lie. And until you take that mask off, rip it from your face, you will never evolve, because evolution doesn't happen in the spotlight. It begins in silence, when you finally ask, who am I without this role? So stay with me, because in the next few moments, we're going to confront a truth you've felt your whole life, but never dared to say out loud. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This might be the first real step you've ever taken toward freedom. Most people move through life not as who they truly are, but as the character they were told to be. It starts early, long before you knew how to question anything. You were taught how to smile appropriately, how to speak respectfully, how to behave correctly. And you followed those rules, not because they made sense to your soul, but because disobedience meant disapproval, and approval meant survival. So you adapted. You learned to trade your authenticity for acceptance. You put on the costume they gave you, sometimes without even realizing it was a costume. And what was that costume? It was the identity your environment crafted for you. If you were born into a family that valued silence, you became quiet, even if your spirit was loud. If you were raised among people who feared failure, you became careful, even if you were born to take risks. If you were constantly told to be nice, you became agreeable, even if your heart screamed to challenge everything. This is how the mask formed, slowly, silently, completely. And the tragedy is not that people wear masks. The real tragedy is that they forget they're wearing them. They come to believe the mask is their face. So now they walk around in carefully constructed personas. They say what they're expected to say. They work in jobs they don't care about to uphold an image they don't recognize. They pursue goals that never belonged to them because somewhere deep down, they believe that if they just perform well enough, they'll finally feel whole. But wholeness never comes through pretending. It only arrives when you stop playing a part in someone else's play. The identity you are handed is not necessarily the one that will lead you to your highest self. It might keep you safe. It might win you approval. It might even bring you temporary success, but it will not bring you peace. It will not bring you expansion, and it will never bring you freedom. Because freedom doesn't come from perfecting the role. It comes from realizing you were never supposed to be acting in the first place. What if the real you is buried under all that polish? What if the growth you're craving isn't about improving the character, but removing the disguise altogether? That's what evolution is. It's not becoming better at being who they told you to be. It's unlearning everything that isn't aligned with who you actually are. But the world doesn't like when you do that. When you start to remove the costume, people get uncomfortable, not because you're wrong, but because your authenticity exposes their illusion. Your truth reminds them of what they buried to fit in. And so they'll push you to get back in character. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you selfish, ungrateful, or even lost. But hear this. You are not lost. You are becoming. You are shedding what never belonged to you. And that shedding is sacred. To evolve, you must first confront the question, whose role am I playing? Is this voice in my head truly mine? Or does it belong to a parent, a teacher, a culture that feared individuality? Are these dreams mine? Or are they hand-me-downs I accepted because I didn't know I could say no? Is the life I'm living truly mine? Or is it a costume I've been wearing for so long I forgot I could take it off? And when you begin to question like this, honestly, relentlessly, you'll start to feel it, the quiet tug back toward yourself, the gentle remembrance of the you beneath the performance. That's the beginning of evolution, not when you become someone new, but when you return to someone ancient, someone real. So, no, you can't evolve while wearing a role that wasn't born from your soul. You can't grow into your true form while trying to stay lovable in the eyes of those who only know the act. Evolution requires something deeper, a willingness to disappoint the world in order to be true to yourself. And once you do that, once you drop the role, they can no longer control you, because you'll no longer be acting, you'll be alive. From the moment you're born, the world starts shaping you not into who you are, but into who it needs you to be to keep the machine running smoothly. It's subtle at first. You're praised for being well-behaved when you sit quietly, discouraged from asking too many questions, rewarded for following instructions. It sounds innocent, even loving, but underneath, it is a system designed not to help you discover yourself, but to make you fit in. You're not taught to trust your intuition. You're not shown how to explore your inner world or challenge the structures around you. Instead, you're handed a mold, a preset image of what success, happiness, and purpose are supposed to look like. You're shown which boxes to check, which lines to color inside, and which ideas are acceptable. Conformity becomes a silent religion, and most people pray at its altar every day without even knowing it. Think about school. You're not trained to question, you're trained to remember, not to think freely, but to recall the right answer. Sit down, raise your hand, recite the facts, pass the test. Creativity isn't encouraged unless it fits neatly within the curriculum. Passion is only useful if it can be monetized or standardized. Individuality is mentioned in mission statements, but not in practice. You are told to dream, but only within the boundaries already drawn for you. Then you enter the workforce, and the game intensifies. You're expected to pick a path quickly and stick to it. Not because it calls to you, but because it's safe, because it's stable, because it earns approval from the outside world. You learn to show up on time, smile through dissatisfaction, suppress your true emotions, and speak in tones that are professional, even when your spirit is screaming. The suit becomes your new uniform. The title becomes your new identity. And still, no one asks who you really are. No one cares. They only care that you play your role well. Relationships follow the same pattern. You attract what you perform. You become lovable only when you are agreeable, attractive only when you are compliant, valuable only when you are needed, but never too much, never too loud, never too raw. You're praised for being easy to love, not for being fully alive. So you play it safe. You dim your light. You compromise pieces of yourself to avoid discomfort, to prevent abandonment. But in doing so, you abandon yourself. Society, as it's designed, doesn't want awakened individuals. It wants predictable, productive players. People who do what they're told. People who seek approval. People who feel guilty for asking, is this all there is? Because when you ask that question sincerely, something dangerous begins. You start to awaken. You start to remember you were not made to conform. You start to feel the friction between your true nature and the identity you've been forced into. The system doesn't just discourage authenticity, it punishes it. Step out of line and you'll risk ridicule. Speak your truth and you might be rejected. Choose a path that doesn't make sense to others, and you'll be labeled reckless, irresponsible, even lost. But those judgments aren't proof you're wrong. They're proof that you're breaking free, that you're no longer willing to contort yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. Here's the paradox. The world teaches you to conform and then blames you for being unfulfilled. It tells you to follow the rules and then mocks you for not having found your passion. It teaches you to hide and then demands authenticity. But if you want to evolve, you have to see through the illusion. You have to recognize that the cage was decorated to look like a palace, but it's still a cage. Real evolution means stepping away from the applause. It means disappointing others to be true to yourself. It means questioning everything you were taught to believe about who you should be. And that's terrifying. Because the moment you stop conforming, you stop being predictable. And in a world built on predictability, that makes you dangerous. But it also makes you free. You weren't made to be normal. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to become, to wake up, to see through the layers of conditioning and say, no more. No more shrinking, no more pretending, no more playing a role in someone else's script. The world may have trained you to conform, but your soul never agreed to it. And when you finally listen to that deeper voice within, the one that's been whispering all along, you'll realize conformity was never safety. It was suffocation. And your evolution starts the moment you begin to breathe again. The most dangerous prison is the one you can't see. And for many, that prison is built not of steel or stone, but of silent agreements and invisible expectations. You agree to be someone you're not, and you carry that agreement for years, sometimes for a lifetime. All the while, you wonder why you feel empty, why joy feels fleeting, why life seems like it's happening to someone else, even though you're the one living it. The answer is simple. You are not free, not because you're held back by external forces, but because you're trapped in a role you didn't choose, a role you inherited, one that was whispered into your mind long before you had the awareness to question it. You were taught what a good person looks like, what a real man or a respectable woman is supposed to be, what success means, what love should look like. You were handed scripts, pre-written lines for a play you never auditioned for, and you were expected to memorize them, rehearse them, perform them, and most do. But the performance costs you. It costs you your truth. You begin to shape your personality around what earns approval, not what reflects your essence. You say yes when you want to scream no. You nod in agreement when your soul recoils in disagreement. You smile when you're dying inside. Because breaking character means breaking the illusion. And that feels too risky in a world where authenticity is rarely rewarded. And so you adapt to survive. You convince yourself the mask is your face. You tell yourself, this is just who I am, even though something inside you knows. That's not the whole story. But here's the thing. You cannot evolve while you're stuck in character. Because evolution requires truth, not performance. It demands that you meet yourself in the mirror without costume, without script, without an audience. And that meeting, it's terrifying, because once you see the lie, you can't unsee it. Then you feel the tension between who you are and who you've been pretending to be. You realize the cost of your inauthenticity, and then the choice arrives. Do you continue the performance, safe, comfortable, familiar, or do you step off the stage and begin the raw, unfiltered, holy journey back to yourself? Most won't. Most would rather feel accepted in a lie than exiled in truth. But not you. You wouldn't still be listening if you hadn't already felt it. That pull, that longing, that ache to be something more than a character in someone else's story. So what happens when you stop playing the role? You lose people, you lose comfort, you lose your place in the old story. But here's what you gain. You gain clarity, you gain presence, you gain power. Because when you stop performing, your energy returns to you. Every ounce of effort you once spent managing appearances becomes fuel for growth. Your voice returns, not the voice that pleases others, but the voice that speaks your soul's truth, even if it trembles. And yes, it will be lonely at times. Shedding the role means walking through the wilderness of uncertainty. It means learning to sit in silence without reaching for applause. It means rediscovering who you are without the noise of expectations. But there is freedom there, not the shallow freedom of doing whatever you want, but the sacred freedom of being who you are, of saying, this is my path, even if no one understands it, of waking up in the morning and not feeling like you have to put on a mask just to be loved, of finally feeling at home in your own skin. And that right there is the beginning of true evolution, not becoming someone better, not becoming someone more successful or more impressive, but becoming someone real. That kind of growth can't happen while you're still performing. It begins only when you stop. When you step back, take a breath, and admit, this role was never mine to play. Then, and only then, can you begin to live, not as a version of who you're supposed to be, but as the truth of who you are. There is a hidden cost to playing the role they gave you, and it's not just your time, your energy, or your peace of mind. The greatest cost is that you begin to forget who you are. Not in the dramatic sense, like forgetting your name or your past, but in the quiet, insidious way that slowly eats away at your sense of self, like water dripping on stone. Day after day, you become a little less you and a little more of what they told you to be. The role becomes second nature. At some point, you stop questioning whether it's even a role. You believe it is you. You wake up, go through your routine, smile when expected, speak when allowed, suppress what feels too deep, too bold, too real. You respond to life through the filter of a character that was designed not to honor your truth, but to maintain the comfort of others. And the tragedy is, this character often works. It wins approval, it attracts relationships, it gets hired, it earns applause. But all of this affirmation is directed at the mask, not the person behind it. So no matter how much praise you receive, it never truly lands, it never nourishes the soul, because it isn't you being loved. It's the version of you that was edited to be acceptable. You begin to wonder why, despite being liked and successful, you feel hollow. Why the laughter at dinner parties feels staged. Why relationships feel transactional. Why achievements feel like checkpoints rather than triumphs. It's because you're living from the surface, not from the center, and nothing built from the surface can satisfy the depth of your being. The self you were meant to become, the one that is raw, intuitive, untamed, doesn't thrive under performance. It suffocates. It withers in the corner, while the role takes center stage. It waits patiently, hoping that one day you'll turn toward it and say, I remember you. But for many, that day never comes. This is why growth feels so elusive for some. You can't grow if you're not rooted in authenticity. You can chase improvement all you want, read the books, attend the seminars, get the degrees, but if the foundation is false, the structure will always feel unstable. Real growth doesn't start when you stack accomplishments on top of your persona. It starts when you begin the hard work of stripping the persona away. And that stripping is not easy. In fact, it's painful, because the role, no matter how limiting, feels safe. It's familiar, it has boundaries, it's predictable. Letting go of it feels like losing your identity. And in a sense, it is. You're losing the identity that was constructed for you. But what you're gaining is so much more. Your essence, your truth, your original self, the one you came into this world as, before the world told you who to be. Here's something that's difficult to admit. Many of the things we desire, love, belonging, purpose, are blocked not by lack, but by misalignment. You cannot attract what is meant for your true self while you're projecting a false one. Love meant for your soul cannot reach you if it's being intercepted by your role. Opportunities designed for your authentic gifts will pass you by if you're performing someone else's script. Every time you deny your truth to play the part, you delay the life that was meant for you. And still, there will be moments when you're tempted to go back, to slide back into the role because it's easier, because being fully yourself in a world that profits off your doubt can feel unbearable. But remember this, comfort is not the same as peace. Numbness is not the same as healing. obedience is not the same as wisdom, there will also be fear. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear that if you stop playing the role, no one will love the real you. But what if the real tragedy is not being unloved, but never being known at all? What if the deeper pain is living your entire life as a stranger to yourself? Evolution demands courage. It asks you to walk away from applause and into silence, to sit in the space between who you've been and who you're becoming. That space is sacred. It's uncomfortable. It's disorienting. But it's where transformation happens. There is no growth in pretending. Pretending keeps you stagnant, keeps you seeking external validation instead of inner truth. Pretending may win you the crowd, but it will never give you yourself. The path to becoming begins when you stop. When you stop pretending, stop pleasing, stop performing, when you say, this mask is heavy, this act is tired, I'm ready to meet myself again. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to explain your journey to those who only knew the character, not the soul behind it. You just have to be willing to begin, to get honest, to get quiet, to get real. And once you do, something extraordinary happens. The world begins to shift. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You start to attract people who see you, not just your persona. You begin to move in alignment with your purpose, not someone else's plan. Life begins to feel like it fits, not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped forcing yourself to fit into something that was never made for you. That is the moment your evolution becomes unstoppable. Not because you became more, but because you finally became you. The greatest betrayal is the one we commit against ourselves. Not because we're malicious, but because we're afraid. Afraid of being different. Afraid of being alone. Afraid that if we show up as who we truly are, we'll be rejected. So we settle into the roles assigned to us. Daughter, son, leader, follower, the nice one, the strong one, the silent one, the one who always has it together. These roles may have served a purpose once, may have helped us survive childhood, avoid punishment, gain approval, but now they've become cages. And every time we shrink to fit them, we send a silent message to our soul, you are not safe here. The cost? Disconnection, not just from others, but from ourselves. Disconnection is subtle. It doesn't show up all at once. It sneaks in. First, you stop doing the things that used to make you feel alive, not because you don't love them anymore, but because they don't fit the role. Then you stop saying what you really think, afraid it might offend, afraid it might expose you. Eventually, you stop asking yourself what you really want, because your wants don't match the script. You become a stranger in your own life, a spectator watching a version of yourself move through the world, knowing deep down that something essential has been lost. And this disconnection, this slow drift from your core, begins to affect everything. Your relationships become transactional, built not on intimacy, but on expectations. Your work becomes mechanical, not a calling, but a duty. Your inner world becomes noisy and restless, even in moments of silence. You might find yourself surrounded by people, yet still feel deeply alone. Because no matter how close someone gets to the role you play, they can never truly touch the real you. But here's the truth. No one can connect with a mask. They can admire it. They can compliment it. They can even fall in love with it, but they cannot know it. And if they don't know it, they don't know you. So every connection you form while wearing that mask becomes a performance. You find yourself wondering why love feels hollow, why intimacy feels distant. It's because the part of you that longs to be seen is hidden behind the very role you think will make you lovable. What you need to realize is that connection doesn't happen when you perfect the part you've been given. It happens when you drop the script altogether, when you speak from the heart even if your voice shakes, when you act from truth even if it disappoints others, when you stop trying to be what people want and start being who you actually are. And this is not easy. To drop the role means risking disapproval. It means inviting misunderstanding. It means people might leave, and some will. But the ones who stay, the ones who come into your life when you're no longer performing, they're not attracted to the mask. They're drawn to the essence. They don't want the character, they want the soul. And those are the connections that heal, that nourish, that last. The irony is, the role you're so afraid to let go of is the very thing blocking the relationships you crave most. We think that by hiding our flaws and our truth, we'll be more acceptable. But it's our truth, not our performance, that creates intimacy. Vulnerability is the bridge, and you can't be vulnerable while pretending. So the question becomes, who are you without the role? Most people don't know, and that's okay. That uncertainty is the beginning of truth. It's the place where real connection can begin. Because to know yourself, you must first be willing to be unknown. You must be willing to enter the silence, to step off the stage, to sit with your real thoughts, your raw feelings, your unmet needs, and ask, what is actually true for me? Not what they told you, not what they expect. What's true? This journey of reconnection isn't grand or glamorous. It's quiet. It happens in small choices, saying no when you usually say yes, telling someone how you really feel, spending time alone without the need to explain it. And slowly, the pieces return. The clarity, the depth, the sense that your life is once again yours. And when you live from that place, everything changes. The right people find you, not because you contorted yourself into something pleasing, but because you stood in your truth. The right path reveals itself, not because you strategized your way there, but because you finally stopped fighting your intuition. Even solitude becomes sacred because it's no longer a sign of rejection, but a space where you meet yourself. It all begins the moment you stop trying to be someone for everyone. The moment you realize that connection is not earned through performance, but through presence. Not by being impressive, but by being real. So if you feel disconnected, if your life feels like it doesn't fit, don't ask what you need to add. Ask what you need to release. What part of the role is suffocating you? What truth are you afraid to tell? What part of you have you silenced just to maintain an illusion? Let that be your starting point. The world doesn't need more perfect masks. It needs more honest faces. And the people who are meant to walk with you in this life, they're not waiting for your performance. They're waiting for your truth. Be brave enough to give it to them and to yourself. There comes a moment when you look at your life and feel a quiet unease. Not loud, not urgent, but persistent. It's like a whisper in the background, one you've ignored for years. It doesn't shout that you're doing something wrong. It simply asks, is this all there is? You've played the part. You've done what was expected. You've fit into the role they gave you. And now, even with the accomplishments, the image, the validation, something feels missing. That missing piece is purpose. But purpose is not found in the roles we're assigned. It doesn't exist in the identity others designed for us. It can't be reached through performance or pretension. Purpose is discovered only when we strip away what is false, when we dare to go beneath the layers of expectation and ego to uncover the raw material of who we actually are. And that journey doesn't begin by adding more. It begins by letting go. You cannot live a life of purpose if you're not living as your true self. The path to purpose is not outside of you. It begins inward, at the intersection of your deepest truth and your boldest action. But if your life is built on roles that don't reflect who you really are, every step you take, no matter how well-meaning, takes you further from that alignment. This is the quiet tragedy of living a borrowed identity. You can be successful, admired, even envied, and still feel completely out of place in your own life. That's because you're climbing a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. You're chasing dreams that aren't yours. And even when you reach the top, you don't feel joy, you feel emptiness. Not because you failed, but because you succeeded at becoming someone you were never meant to be. When you play the role they gave you, you abandon the life that was uniquely yours to live. Your talents become tools for validation instead of vehicles for expression. Your voice becomes rehearsed rather than real. Your decisions start to revolve around maintaining the image, not honoring the soul. And the longer you play the part, the more distant your purpose becomes, not because it's hiding, but because you are. Purpose requires your presence, not the presence of the mask, not the role, not the version of you that people expect, your real presence, the part of you that's unfiltered, unsure, maybe even a little afraid, but awake. The part that remembers what it feels like to move through the world, not from duty, but from desire, not from fear, but from truth. But truth is disruptive. It shakes the foundations. It threatens the structure you've built to survive. That's why many people choose comfort over calling. The role is familiar, it's stable, it offers predictable rewards, but comfort isn't the same as fulfillment. It soothes the surface while the soul starves underneath. At some point, you have to choose safety or soul, because you cannot evolve and stay hidden. You cannot rise and remain small. You cannot live your purpose while pretending to be someone you're not. And if you've been feeling lost, numb, uninspired, it's not because you're broken. It's because you're being called to shed the skin that no longer fits. You're not here to perform a part. You're here to participate in your own becoming. And the becoming starts with rebellion, not the loud, external kind, but the quiet, sacred kind. The rebellion of telling yourself the truth, of saying, this role, this mask, this script, I don't want it anymore. The rebellion of trusting your inner knowing more than the outer noise. The rebellion of walking away from what's expected so you can walk toward what's authentic. That kind of courage doesn't just change your direction, it changes your vibration. It shifts the people you attract, the paths that open, the experiences that find you. Suddenly, things start to align, not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally being honest. Living with purpose doesn't mean you have everything figured out. It means you're living in truth, one step at a time. It means you're willing to disappoint others to be at peace with yourself. It means you stop asking for permission to be who you already are. There is no purpose in perfection. There is purpose in presence, in showing up fully, in creating, connecting, loving, and leading, not as a character, but as a soul, not from obligation, but from overflow. You won't find purpose by asking the world who you should be. You'll find it by listening to the still, small voice inside you that never stopped whispering, even when you were too busy playing the part to hear it. That voice will lead you home, not to the life that's expected of you, but to the life that's meant for you. But you have to choose it. You have to risk being misunderstood. You have to risk starting over. You have to risk losing the identity that kept you safe, but also kept you small. Because only when you drop the role can you rise in your truth. And when you do, life begins to feel different. Not easier, but real. Not perfect, but meaningful. You start to move with clarity. You begin to serve with heart. You create, not from fear of failure, but from the fire of purpose. And that's when evolution begins, not just in what you do, but in who you are. The role you were given was never yours. It was a cage, beautifully decorated and carefully maintained, but it was still a cage. Now the door is open, but only you can walk out. Not everyone will understand, not everyone will follow, but evolution is not a group event. It is a sacred personal unraveling, and it begins the moment you stop playing the role and start becoming real.